So then you guys got married and you had 4 wonderful children.
That's right. 4 wonderful children.
What was the hardest part about raising children?
Well, the children were raised mainly by Maria. So she was not working at the time and spent all of her time with the children, took them to the park, took them to exercise, answered their questions, prepared their meals, everything. And so they spent most of the time with her. I just tried to work and do the financing of the family. And I would come home and visit with them some, but was not able to add much influence to them. But I tried to teach them by example and tried to give them all the opportunities to explore things on their own, like going to visit museums, going on trips, visit new places, and they, with their own initiative, they picked up these things. It's not that I taught them to do it, but I gave them the exposure in order to come up with their own knowledge. And they were all excellent students. They all excelled in school, got top grades, and went on to college, graduated from college, and are currently all professional type people.
Which of your children is the most like you, do you think?
Most what?
The most similar to you? Who is most like you?
Most like me? Well, I would say it's a combination of probably Leslie and Patty and maybe Andy.
Not me.
Terry is more outgoing than I am. She's more friendly than I am, and more likable than I am.
I don't think so.
So Terry is sort of a special person that way. She didn't get all the bad traits that I had.
How did you go about choosing the names for your children?
Well,
start with Leslie. Where did that come from?
Maria selected Leslie's name, and I don't know where she got that name, although I have an uncle named Leslie, but it's spelled differently. When she wanted to name him Leslie, I insisted on spelling him with L-E-S-L-E-E from General Robert E. Lee.
Really?
And so that's, he has a southern name from that standpoint. When we named Patty, I wanted her name from Patty Page, because she had a tie-in with Tennessee, with the Tennessee Waltz, and I liked Patty Page quite a bit at that time. And it's spelled P-A-T-T-I, as she spells it. Getting back to Leslie, we decided on the name Leslie, but we had no middle name, and we wanted each one to have a middle name. So I guess Mom was still in the hospital after having birth, and I was at the house and we were talking on the phone. about the middle name, and so I picked up the phone book and opened it up, and I looked down the line there and I saw Ross. So I picked it out of the phone book because it's a short name, and it sort of went with Leslie Ross Davidson. With Patty, it sort of rolled off being Ann, Patty Ann. So that sort of came naturally.
Well, you were concerned about spelling. Why did you spell it that way?
What, Patty?
No, Anne.
Oh, A-N-N-E?
Mm-hmm.
That seemed more dignified than A-N-N, more significant than just Ann. So we put an E on it. And I don't know where we came up with Andrew.
Maybe you just started where you left off with Anne.
Yeah, maybe. And I don't know where we came with Wayne, but that's what we came up with.
Maybe you weren't involved in that
Maybe I wasn't.
decision.
And then with Teresa, Mom wanted to have a real Spanish sounding name. So although we call her Terry, her name is Teresa, and that is Spanish.
Isn't it pronounced differently in Spanish?
Yes, I think so. Teresa, because the E's are pronounced as A in Spanish, although in English we call it Teresa. And Ellen, I don't know where that came from.
Well, Mom told me it came from a soap opera that she was
Maybe
watching
so.
at the time.
Maybe so. So that was the naming of the children.
And how about your middle name?
Well, my middle name is an abbreviation that came about from my father's name. He was originally named Alpheus Davidson with no middle initial. At that time there were no birth certificates to register exactly what the names were. He was born in 1886. So his name developed into Alpha Davidson, still with no middle initial. Then he decided that he ought to have a middle initial. So he picked C and called himself Cleveland. So he was Alpha Cleveland Davidson by his own selection. But in his work in the little town of Trenton, Tennessee, he was worked for a distributor of gasoline, and a lot of people got to know him, and they called him Alf. And as a result, when I went around with him, they would call me Little Alf. So, and that got to be my middle name. It's Lindell Alf Davidson.
So that's not on your birth certificate, but you...
Yes, it is.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they named me that actually before they started calling me Little Alf. Of course, that was after I was born. What they called me that.
Who do you think you are most like, your father or your mother?
I think I have traits of both, but probably favors my mother in my disposition and my the way I associate with people. More is like my mother than my father. I am sort of isolated and laid back, whereas my father was extremely friendly and forward.
What memories do you have of him growing up? Was he, what sort of activities did you do together?
Well, growing up, I was interested in learning in school what I could learn, and most of it favored the scientific and mathematical portions of the grades, and I seemed to enjoy that more than some of the social and things like history and other things did not interest me as much as science and mathematics.
So in terms of games, you liked doing calculations and
Yes, I still exercise my mind by doing mental calculations of distances and other things that involve mathematics. I frequently do things by approximation, whereas I maybe not have the ability to recite pi to the 2000th point. I can do a portion of that and stop when I reach my limit.
what, could you ever do it to the 2000th point?
Can I do what?
Did you used to be able to do it to the 2000th point?
No.
How far could you do it?
I can do about 5 points, I think, right now. 3.14159.
That's pretty good.
That's close enough. As I say, that's close enough for government work,
So,
which I used to work for, by the way. My dad allowed me to claim a cotton patch, 1 acre cotton patch, and I farmed that, and we picked the cotton and took it to the cotton gin to sell it, and I got the money from the cotton that I sold, and I opened up a bank account and put that in the bank. And then he also gave me a cow which he milked, and we used the milk from that. But then later he sold the cow when I was ready to go to college, and so with the cow and the cotton patch I was able to finance my first year and a half at the University of Tennessee. I just about ran out of money then though, but then I was called up into the service as a World War II, and later I got the GI Bill, so that financed the rest of my college education. I got $500 a semester to pay for that, and that paid for the schooling, the room and board, and the fees.
wow.
And that was a blessing to me to be able to get my education so I could graduate and become a professional.
Do you ever remember being disciplined for anything that you did as a child?
Yes, well, I wasn't really disciplined, but one time I was at the farmhouse. I was in my teens, I guess. I had some disagreement with my father, and I didn't strike him, but I indicated I was about to strike him. And my mother said, "Look what you almost did." And that put me to shame for that, and that was my worst memory of discipline. There was no physical discipline that I ever recall receiving. Except one other time, when I was in the first grade, the teacher was Miss Lucille McCree, and we were walking around doing something. We weren't sitting at our desk, but I was just actually, I guess I was 6 years old. Anyway, we were walking around, and for some reason, or with no reason, she tapped me on the head with a pencil. And for no reason, and I hadn't done anything. And I remember that as being discipline in a way.
But it was unjust.
That could have been just an accident. But I do remember being hit on the head with a pencil, with the rubber end. The earliest memory outside of memory of my doing certain things in photographs, my father had his gasoline truck parked in front of the house, which was the truck was a Model T Ford, and I was being held by my father on his knee outside of the truck with his leg up on the running board of the truck. My father's father, I never knew because he was killed by a falling tree that they were cutting for firewood. With my father on a crosscut saw that had two handles so that you use it to cut back and forth to cut the tree down. A few nights before his death, he had had a nightmare where he dreamed that a tree was falling on him, and he went underneath his bed to try to avoid it in his nightmare. And then a few days or a week or so later, it actually happened.
Wow.
With my father there. I later helped, when we lived at the farm, I later helped my father with the same saw to cut down trees for firewood. And then after we cut them down, we'd cut them into lengths and then split the wood so it would fit within the fireplace to add heat to the building that we lived in, which had no interior heat except for a stove. One time that's significant to me is the death of my father. Went on a trip, and after a week or two, I received a phone call that I should come back and to see him. So I made the trip back, and he was unconscious, at least seemed to be unconscious, although he was still alive and breathing rather hard. And I was able to get to his side and touch him, and I felt that even though he was in a coma, that he knew I was there. And after a few moments, a few minutes, he suddenly stopped breathing, gasping for breath, and closed his mouth. And I felt he had no pulse. So instinctively I started to rub his chest to try to stimulate him, and he opened his mouth and started gasping for breath again, and seemed to come back to life. Although it was only just a few moments that he seemed to be away from life. And the attending physician at this facility came over and told me that most of his systems were failing, and there was very little possibility that he could extend the life, and I should let him go. And that was a very hard part of my life to agree to do that, but I did, and he passed on.